He didn't know that this very morning his life would begin to fold in on itself, like paper thrown into fire. Not suddenly, not with an explosion, but slowly, almost imperceptibly. That's how stories begin, the ones people later talk about and say, if only he had known. But he didn't know. And no one else did. The city was still asleep. Not completely. Here and there a few windows glowed, somewhere a dog barked, somewhere in the distance a train sounded. But overall, it was wrapped in a strange, tense silence. The kind of silence that doesn't calm you, but makes you uneasy. The air was heavy, damp, as if before a storm no one had promised. Andrew sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The alarm clock was silent. He had woken up earlier on his own. That rarely happened to him. Usually, he lived by a schedule, without unnecessary thoughts. But today something inside him felt unsettled. Not fear, not anxiety, more like a strange feeling that he had forgotten something. Even though his mind insisted everything was in place. He slowly stood up, went to the kitchen, turned on the light. The lamp flickered before lighting up. Andrew frowned. Just a small thing, but for some reason it felt out of place. The coffee took longer than usual to boil. Outside the window, fog licked the streetlights, blurring them, making them unreal, as if someone had erased the edges of the world with an eraser. His phone lay on the table, screen facing up. No messages. No missed calls. Silence, even in numbers. Andrew picked up the cup, took a sip, and tasted a bitterness stronger than usual. He didn't know why, but he would remember that taste for the rest of his life. As he got dressed, he suddenly froze. His heart made a strange, short leap, as if his body had sensed something before his mind did. Andrew exhaled and quietly laughed at himself. Overworked, he whispered into the empty room. The car keys lay on the nightstand. He picked them up, feeling the cold metal in his palm. That touch felt important for some reason. Too real. Too clear. As if the world was trying to say, remember this. He walked down the stairs slowly. Each step echoed softly. On the ground floor, it smelled of dampness and old walls. Outside, the fog was thicker than it had seemed from the window. The car waited by the entrance, dark, motionless, like a shadow. Andrew got behind the wheel. The door closed with a dull thud. The world instantly became smaller, limited to the cabin, the dashboard, the windshield. The engine didn't start on the first try. He frowned and turned the key again. This time it came to life, but the sound was slightly different. Just barely. Almost unnoticeable. He pulled out onto the empty road. Streetlights stretched into an endless line, disappearing into the fog. The asphalt was wet, black, like a mirror without a reflection. Andrew drove slower than usual. Not because he was afraid. It just happened that way. At the intersection, he stopped, even though the light was still yellow. For some reason, he didn't want to go on. He looked to the right, then to the left. Empty. Too empty. And at that very moment, before anything happened, a thought pierced him, sharp and brief, like a flash. What if this is the last ordinary minute? He didn't have time to answer himself. The fog ahead seemed to shift. Somewhere within it, there was movement. Headlights, first dim, then brighter. Andrew tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The story had already begun to move. He just hadn't realized it yet. The car slid forward, cutting through the fog as if slowly parting heavy curtains. The headlights carved only short fragments of road out of the darkness, and everything beyond that circle felt non-existent. Andrew sensed the tension rising from his chest to his throat, though outwardly nothing was happening. The road was smooth, traffic minimal, traffic lights working perfectly. Too perfectly. Too quietly. He turned on the radio, not for the music, but to break the silence. A calm, even voice of a host came through the speakers, talking about the weather and the morning news. The words passed through his mind without leaving a trace. Andrew turned the radio off almost immediately. The silence returned, thicker than before. He caught himself thinking that he wasn't driving exactly where he usually went. The route was familiar, but today he turned earlier than planned. As if someone had subtly pushed him toward that decision. Andrew didn't dwell on it. A road is a road. All of them lead somewhere eventually. That's what he had always believed. A bridge appeared ahead. Old, concrete, with low railings. Andrew had known it since childhood. It was always a little colder here than anywhere else, and the sound of the engine echoed in a strange, dull way. He slowed down, unable to explain why. He simply wanted to drive more carefully, as if this stretch of road demanded respect. Halfway across the bridge, he noticed another car. A dark silhouette ahead, almost motionless. The headlights were off. Andrew tensed, his foot instinctively moving to the brake. The distance closed slowly, but his heart began to race. When he drew closer, it became clear. The car was pulled over to the side. Empty. Doors closed. Darkness inside. Strange, Andrew muttered. He drove past, but in the rearview mirror he kept seeing that silhouette until the fog finally swallowed it. Inside, there was a feeling that he had just passed something important, that he hadn't stopped where he should have. The road began to twist. There were fewer streetlights now, and the fog grew thicker. Andrew felt the same strange tension from the morning return. It no longer felt random. He glanced at the clock. Time was moving, but it felt slowed down. Minutes stretched unnaturally long. On one of the curves, he saw the light of oncoming headlights. At first faint, then sharp. The car was approaching fast, too fast for this road. Andrew instinctively slowed and pressed closer to his side of the lane. His heart pounded loudly, almost in rhythm with the engine. The oncoming car flew past without slowing. In that instant, Andrew thought he saw the driver's face, tense, focused, as if he were looking not at the road, but through it. It lasted only a second, but it sent a chill through him. Andrew took a deep breath. "Pull yourself together," he said quietly to himself. "It's just a road." But the road was no longer just a road. It had become a corridor you didn't want to leave abruptly, in one sudden movement. Every meter demanded attention. Every sign felt like a warning. Every shadow, a possibility. He remembered that thought from the intersection again, the last ordinary minute. It circled in his head, refusing to let go. Andrew didn't know why, but he felt it. Something was ahead. Not necessarily bad, just inevitable. The fog suddenly began to thin. The road opened into a long, straight stretch. It felt like the tension eased slightly. Andrew even allowed his shoulders to relax. He increased his speed just a little. And it was precisely then, on that straight road where nothing was supposed to happen, that he noticed movement ahead, barely visible, as if a shadow crossed the road. Andrew narrowed his eyes, trying to make out what it was. A second of hesitation. A second of silence. He didn't have time to understand what he had seen. A shadow? A person? Or just an illusion caused by fog and fatigue? But his body reacted faster than his thoughts. Andrew slammed on the brakes. The car skidded. The tires lost grip on the wet asphalt. And in that moment the world stopped being coherent. Time broke. Everything happened in fragments. Sound, first dull, then sharp. The headlights suddenly swung sideways. A sensation as if he were being pushed out of reality. Andrew felt the seatbelt cut into his chest, his body lurch forward, then stop abruptly. His mind flashed into emptiness. He didn't scream. He didn't have time. The air vanished, as if someone had switched it off along with the world. The impact wasn't loud, but it was final. The car came to rest at a strange angle, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than any noise. Andrew didn't immediately realize he was alive. First came pain, not sharp, but dull, spreading through his entire body. Then a ringing in his ears. He tried to move his hand. It worked. That surprised him. He blinked. In front of his eyes, cracks in the windshield, with dim light seeping through them. "No," he whispered, not knowing what exactly he was denying. The door wouldn't open. He tried again. Nothing. His breathing became shallow. A cold sensation spread through his chest. Somewhere outside, he heard footsteps. Then voices. Muffled, as if underwater. Someone was knocking on the car, someone shouting for him not to fall asleep. "I'm here," Andrew managed to say. Those words drained the last of his strength. His consciousness faded in and out. He remembered faces, anxious, focused. Red light flashing somewhere nearby. Cold hands touching his shoulder. They told him to breathe. He breathed. Or tried to. When they pulled him out of the car, the sky was already growing lighter. The fog was slowly dispersing, as if it didn't care what had happened. Andrew lay on the stretcher, staring upward. The world felt strangely calm. Unfairly calm. He regained full consciousness later, in the hospital. Time became fragmented again. White light, quiet voices, the smell of medicine. They told him he had survived. That it was a miracle. That a little more, and everything could have ended differently. Andrew listened, but the words didn't reach him. Inside, there was emptiness. The hardest part wasn't the pain. The hardest thought was, What if I hadn't braked? Or the opposite, what if I hadn't braked so hard? Those questions had no answers. They simply existed. They lived inside him, waking him at night, returning in silence, in the sound of cars, in the smell of wet asphalt. Days passed slowly. Andrew learned to sit, to stand, to take a few steps. The doctors spoke carefully, but honestly. He was lucky. Very lucky. He nodded. But the word lucky felt strange. Because luck and catastrophe now lived side by side within him, without interfering with each other. One evening, he looked out the hospital window. Cars were moving beyond the glass. The world went on, just as it had before that moment. And it was then that he truly realized. That single second on the road had split his life into before and after. And there was no road back. He thought the worst was over. That the accident had remained there, on the wet road, in the fog, among shattered glass. But the real consequences began later, when the doctors, the beeping machines, and the constant motion disappeared. When he was left alone with silence. Coming home felt strange. The apartment looked the same as before, but it felt foreign. Things stood in their places, yet no longer carried familiar comfort. Andrew slowly walked through the rooms, as if seeing them for the first time. In the mirror, he saw himself, slimmer, paler, with eyes that no longer held carelessness. Nights became a trial. Sleep came in fragments. He dreamed of the road, the headlights, the sharp turn of the steering wheel. He woke to the sound of his own breathing, listening to the silence, checking whether he was still here, in reality. Sometimes he simply sat in the dark and waited for morning. Over time, the physical pain faded, but another kind, internal, held on tighter. Andrew began noticing things he had once ignored. How slowly the light changed throughout the day, how differently footsteps sounded on the stairs, how quickly time passed when nothing was postponed for later. He didn't sit behind the wheel for a long time. Even the sound of an engine somewhere outside made him tense. But one day he understood. Running from it meant letting that moment continue to control him. He went outside, slowly approached the car. Just stood there. Without hurry. Without decisions. That was enough for a beginning. Weeks passed. Andrew returned to ordinary life, but differently. He listened more, hurried less. He stopped ignoring fatigue, calls, important words. What once seemed trivial now carried weight, because he knew how easily everything could end. Sometimes he remembered that second on the road. Not with fear, with calm awareness. It had become a boundary, but also a reminder. Of fragility. Of a chance. Of responsibility for every following day. One evening, he drove onto that same highway again. It was light, dry, calm. Andrew drove slowly, holding the wheel firmly, but without tension. He wasn't trying to prove anything to himself. He was simply driving. And for the first time in a long while, he felt not fear, but silence. Not empty, but alive. A silence with room for thoughts, for the future, for life. He didn't know how things would unfold next. But now he knew the main thing. Every moment matters. And he wasn't living after the accident.